Welcome to the Great Distraction.
Welcome back, guys. This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is the war on drugs. My name is Ben. With me today are my co-hosts Joe.
Hello.
Thomas.
Aloha.
And Glenn.
Howdy.
If this is your first time listening, welcome. We thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of topics, and we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, something to ponder. So, recently, many of us within the U.S., many states, I should say, have had been dealing with this legalization of marijuana, be it for recreational purposes or medical purposes, depending on where your state is. And in my perception, we have seen the opposition bring up a lot of angles and topics that to me sound exactly like the old school anti-drug propaganda that was being used, even starting back in the 70s when the war on drugs began. And some of it's just extremely general and basically how you would treat Schedule I drugs, which is how marijuana in particular is still listed. And just hearing all that stuff was just like, wow. I mean, are we really going to go back, to that time and play off of so many naive angles and ignorance among the population?
Well, we are getting dumber, Ben.
Yeah, I think in general, yeah, perhaps yes. But I mean, with the exposure that people have had over the last 50 years almost, on the 40, 50 years, whatever, since then, I mean, I feel like, how can you fool the people with these same old, do people still believe this?
Well, there's new people to fool.
Exactly. Yeah. And you have old ideas that are being pounded into the heads of young, malleable minds. And
reinforced by what their parents heard.
But at the same time, there has been a lot of people turning on and educating themselves and then taking it upon themselves to educate others.
Yeah.
Since that,
and that's
era.
what I'm wondering is like I would think that we have had enough of that, enough growth of that kind of mentality that how can these old basically lies still have the same effect that they once had. The people are not as ignorant and naive as they used to be.
Well, I think what's going to happen now is we're getting rid of the stigma that is related to a lot of drug usage, like marijuana,
weed,
especially.
Yeah.
And it's helping with the spread of legalization. Now it's a slow process, but at least it's moving.
Yeah, it always amazed me that California was so far behind and to become a state. I had always thought that California would be the number one state in America to become legalized first. But in that regard, there was also a lot of other things tied to the legislation and the bill to make it legal that was really bad for everybody in general. There was a lot of hands that were trying to get into the legislation of making it legal. And that was one of the reasons why California took a little while to become a legal recreational state, is because there was a lot of hands in there that shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and I'm sure we have a lot of people who are making a good living off of it who don't want that legalization, of course.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure all the other states are dealing with that too, whether they're either importing their marijuana from somewhere else.
Mexico.
Yeah, or whatever. Or either way, if it becomes legal, now all the importers are not making nearly as much money.
He's an importer-exporter.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So where was I going with that now? Okay. So the population in general, I would think, has been, since they've been exposed to this more, would not be so easily fooled by this resurgence of this old
propaganda.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I mean, you would think too, the whole country, I would think, is watching these other states and these taxes that they're imposing are making them a lot of money.
Yeah.
And one of the first things I thought of is I can't believe that here in California we have lots of taxes, and from road taxes, gas taxes, even toll roads.
Looking at the sun taxes.
Yeah, just all kinds of stuff. And I can't believe that the population isn't beating down the doors of their local congressmen, telling them, hey, vote for this, because the amount of money that they could pull in just by taxing marijuana. I mean, they probably wouldn't have to tax us on anything else for many, many decades, because it would just be so much money coming from that.
Yeah.
That
Well,
they
you also
could-
got to remember too, in the tax bracket of drugs and the war on drugs too. You look back at prohibition. One of the reasons prohibition took so long to become an actual law was because the government was trying to figure out a way to replacing the revenue that was being collected from the taxes of selling alcohol.
Yeah.
And if you follow any history in general, the history buffs out there, you can tie this together very easy that the income tax is what was instituted during that time because we lost the money that we were taking in from taxes on alcohol. But there was a whole nother little regiment going on behind the scenes where people were trying to push the income tax, and income tax wasn't even really pushed until prohibition. That was the replacement on financial standings for the government. There's a lot of things tied into all of this.
Follow the money, man.
Follow the money.
Yeah, that makes sense too. But it just blows me away that they're not jumping on the opportunity to make all that money. You're just literally throwing money down the drain.
Well, you have
You're
people
not-
that are putting stops in the works to prevent these because they don't have their business set up to profit.
Yeah.
You have a
or they were
well-
profiting off of the exact opposite, right?
Right.
Banking off of the illegalization of the prohibition of it.
and our country makes a lot of money off of the criminal charges that are
Oh
You know.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, if
Tons
you
of
do-
jobs created for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jails are big businesses. That's
Yeah,
the
right.
whole-
Yeah, you decriminalize things, you have less people going into prison for minor offenses,
Uh-huh.
so they're making less money.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the thing is, I feel like as a citizen, and I think a lot of citizens in America are like we're talking about, Joe was talking about, people are gonna start speaking up and going, look, it's $80,000 a year to keep somebody in prison. It's what, $9,000 a year to send somebody to school. And you look at the taxes that can be brought in, the revenue of taxes off of just marijuana sales.
Yeah.
So it's like again, it's like we've all said all along: is if you follow the money trail, you'll follow the bullshit. It'll all lead right to it.
Plus, another big problem with it is incarceration. I mean, people who are caught using drugs or with drugs don't need to go to prison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They need rehab,
Yeah.
which is not a course of action that our country follows with.
Well, if the government could make money off of it, I think it would
Yeah.
be a bigger.
Yeah.
That's just it. That costs money instead of making money,
Yeah.
and that's why they just completely.
although a treatment center is cheaper than it would be if I don't know, if we paid for treatment out of our taxes, it would be cheaper than what we're paying for a prison.
Yeah, and that's shown in other countries too. I mean, it shows you what America values. It's to get offenders, quote unquote, into the system.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of times when somebody goes to jail and maybe they don't necessarily belong there, they get messed up inside by interactions and gangs, and they come out worse off than they went in.
Yeah, I mean,
Fact.
even if you don't get messed up in there, once you have a felony on you, I mean, that follows you the rest of your
Yep.
days. Nobody wants to hire you. Nobody,
Yep.
you can't. It's much harder to get a good job, or like a real
Get a
job.
place to live.
Yeah, exactly. It follows you
Yeah.
and messes your life up in every single way. And like, wait a minute, you were selling weed? Seriously?
Oh yeah, you got caught in the eighth.
Yeah, or
You know?
what?
I mean, I grew up in Indiana, so I can tell you some horror stories about the ridiculousness of cops and the battle on the war against drugs. The Midwest is probably, obviously the Bible Belt situation, but that's the mentality they have about everything. I had friends get arrested for having a roach in their car. Went to jail. Now a permanent record. Spent time in jail, and by the time you get roped into that, then what happens is the government really makes money because they make money off of you in court. They make money off of you in rehabs. You have to pay
And your
for all
fines,
these things,
yeah,
all the fines,
yep.
everything else. You have to pay for all those things, and if you don't pay them, they just send you to jail.
Yeah,
So it's just a big money machine. The war on drugs is a money machine.
big time. Big
It's
time.
not for any of us.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to start off with that general concept of how it related to marijuana with the legalization of that going on right now. But I mean, really, this is a much larger encompassing topic, right? I mean, it's much more than just weed. It's a
It's a war on personal
Everything,
freedom.
it definitely comes down to that. Yeah, and that's a totally interesting to look at because we have a lot of other countries that we can do whatever it is we want to do right over there. Amsterdam, right? A lot of people fly out to Amsterdam so they can try messing around with drugs that are everything's legal out there, right? But it seems to work for them. It's not like their entire government's failed and everybody's addicted to drugs. It's just like not everybody's going to take the opportunity just because it's there.
We have this delusion beaten into us that the American way and the American rules are the best.
Yeah.
and they're what works.
It's also beaten into us to believe what it is our government tells us, and when they tell us that
Drugs are bad, okay?
okay.
Yeah. Well, I remember growing up, and I started into the Just Say No program really young. And I don't even know why now, maybe because my parents wanted me to do it or something, but I remember wearing the shirts. I remember going to the after-school meetings. I remember watching the videos on, what drugs did and why to stay away from them and how to stay away from them when your friends offer them to you. And I remember one of the first things that I heard is that this little tiny drug on a piece of paper called LSD will drive you insane for a period of time, like if you were in a bipolar, peak. And that right there just installed itself in my brain. And I thought, what does that mean? How interesting. Yeah. So it actually sparked an interest in me wanting to experiment with things like that.
Yeah.
Had the reversed,
reversed
impact. But I remember the club mentality around it. It was, looking back now, it was very interesting to think about.
It was an extracurricular activity for sure. I can remember a cop coming in one time with this. I can't really remember what it looked like, but basically the general concept was this wooden, maybe 20 inches by 30 inches box frame that had glass over it, and there was a whole bunch of different types of drugs in this thing. Yeah, I remember thinking, wow, that's what crack looks like.
He's gonna pass around, let everybody sample it.
Yeah. Well, that's why it was sealed behind the glass, right? But I remember looking through and looking at all these things, and there was some sort of, and I was really young, I'm maybe third grade or something like that.
Young and impressionable.
Yeah, I don't really know what I was looking at, but I remember things looked like little glass. Now I can kind of associate it, kind of glass tubes for smoking crack. Just stuff like that was in there, right? A needle, I think, was in there. Just all kinds of funny stuff like that.
But these were all programs through your school that were trying to educate
this
you.
was in my elementary school, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I remember the cop came to school as well, and we all sat in the back of the cop car, He'd
wow.
talk to you about what it's like to be back there and how it's no fun and you don't want to be there and don't do drugs,
Wow. Did they explain how the accidental gun that nobody noticed gets in the backseat too?
No, they did not.
They didn't tell you might get shot for holding your
leaning
cell
over.
phone. Yeah, no, they didn't talk about that.
Yeah, when I was in school, I was in school in the and like junior high and beginning of high school in the 80s, and that was really when the whole like Just Say No campaign came out. And I remember watching Nancy Reagan live on television with the whole Just Say No speech. And I don't know how old I was pretty young, but I remember just looking at that thinking it just smelled like crap to me. I mean, just everything about it seemed so stupid. And the fact that crazy old lady was telling me not to do something made me just want to do it even more.
Did they talk about that they were going to roll it out to elementary schools to kids in that type of program?
Well, I don't really remember. Yeah, I don't really remember the Just Say No campaign being like pushed into like school and stuff. And I went to public schools in the inner city.
Yeah.
So I would have thought that's where they would have started. But
I'm sure that became part of her political platform,
right?
As it gets rolled out, just like No Child Left Behind was for ours.
Yeah, it's something for them to stand behind, get funding
for.
Yeah. And the thing is, the thing that I noticed the most about the Just Say No campaign and that whole 80s war on drugs was that it really was a fine-tuned scare tactic for the elderly. Every older person that I knew back then, grandparents, everything else.
Well, remember the older people are the voters,
well,
right?
Absolutely.
So that's what you always want to hit.
And they were the conservative Bible Belt. That's where I was at. But it was all the old people who were like just bought it up. Just like the evangelists on Sunday morning TV. They just bought it up because it's God-fearing, it's the right way to do, and blah blah all this.
And it's your leaders, your political leaders are telling you this.
And the ideology hits home because we have to save our children from this threat. Yeah. Let's band together.
Grandma wants to save the kids.
Yep.
How could you argue against that? What your grandma? You don't care about your grandchildren?
That would make you un-American.
Right? Yeah, and then you throw that in there.
Support our troops.
Right?
That's it. Pink
See how this whole thing wraps together really well? It's like a blanket of denial. But I feel like the old people back then, when all that was going on, it was one of the things that they always did was that I remember seeing commercials where everybody who looked like me was robbing an old person on television.
Yeah.
That was a stereotype that I grew up with. If you had long hair, you were different, you didn't fit in, you're a punk rock kid or any of those things, you were the ones in the commercials for the Just Say No ads that was robbing an old lady, stealing her purse on the side of the street so you could buy crack cocaine.
Yep.
Because that's what everybody does that. You know, I mean,
That's it.
so it's So
How
it's
many
just
times did you do that, Tom?
at least 0. But that was the campaign that I saw in the whole thing, and it really was just a fine-tuned scare tactic. Just more BS to get money for funding for everything else. But it was really weird to me that I pointed that out a lot to other people. How every time I see one of these ads or see something that's just say no, it's always targeted towards violence against the elderly.
Yeah.
And it was like. It reminded me of TV evangelists taking money from elderly people because they're scaring them. Oh, you're close to death. You want to go to heaven? I need another $50.
Yeah, taking advantage of that. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely that fear
fear-mongering.
mongering, and then taking advantage of the results of the weakness that it creates.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's easy to scare old people.
Definitely is, yeah. Especially
but-
because they get a little out of touch,
a little
just
out of touch.
with
They're,
the technology,
Yeah, and they already feel a little bit, isolated with things like, advancements in technology. They're kind of alone a little more often. They're, every little sound, I remember most my grandparents were pretty, decent people that were, weren't easily scared. I'll just say that to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But, I had friends who I'd go over my friends' houses or something, and their parents were just like, I had this friend his mom was like on this tirade for years about how this whole thing about sugar and all of our kids are going to be diabetics because they're eating sugar, and so they couldn't have anything with any sort of flavor. And it was just like you took a good idea and you turned it into a complete disaster because you were scared of something. And I think that's what kind of the point was. The whole thing was just to scare everybody, so they were so off kilter that they had no other choice. They couldn't think about anything else.
Yeah, and along those lines, they didn't seem to take the time to bother to separate out any drugs. It was all drugs. I mean, if you had...
Except for prescription drugs.
Except for, I was going to get into that. But, I mean, they didn't take the time to, and they didn't even bother to include, I know it sounds funny to say, but caffeine, alcohol, tobacco.
Those aren't drugs.
Exactly. Those aren't drugs in the mind of, because there's so many businesses here that make so many billions of dollars off of it that those drugs are okay.
Just like the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that going that route, they didn't mention pharmaceuticals at all. Now, I don't know how much of a problem people dying from overusing or misusing pharmaceutical drugs was in the 70s when the war on drugs started. I know ludes were a big thing.
Yeah.
That was a pharmaceutical, but I don't think were people dying off of ludes.
There was a lot of bad.
There's a lot of bad stuff.
There's a
bad
lot
stuff.
of people taking a lot of methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Pharmaceutical
Always has
grade?
been. Always has
Okay.
been.
Yeah, all through the 70s. And then
Yeah.
and then I think the 70s were probably the era where people started crushing up prescription drugs and snorting them, and
Okay.
that sort of fad started coming
Okay, so
in the
then they
70s
didn't
as
focus
well.
on that at all, I'm sure,
Absolutely
because none of
not.
those were Schedule 1 or even listed as,
Nope.
as illicit drugs.
Nope.
And so they completely leave that out, even though that's killing people left and right, like
Yeah.
it is today.
Yeah.
I think it's important to realize that the big alcohol, big tobacco, pharmaceuticals, these are the powers that have lobbied lawmakers,
Absolutely.
For a very long time in our country. And I think that's very important to remember. Keep in mind,
Yeah,
I mean,
don't do these drugs. These are illegal.
These are okay.
bad.
These
for you.
aren't
these
drugs.
over
But these
here.
ones over here, oh yeah,
These are American lifestyle.
Right. Yeah, it's all how you sell the packaging, really. I mean, and that's the thing too. I mean, like I said in the 80s, I felt like really it was just a mongering of people, especially on the elderly. But you had prescription drugs were already going nuts by that point in the 80s, and so it's just, again, it becomes one of those issues of like, well, who's in charge, who's lobbied the most, because whoever lobbies the most wins in our country. It doesn't matter. You could say and we've talked about this several times. You could repackage and rename crack cocaine and sell it through, I don't know, any of the big pharmaceuticals, and they could make it legal, and they could
They have anesthetics.
absolutely.
Anesthetics is cocaine based.
Yeah.
When you go get a shot local anesthetic and to numb yourself of your teeth, having a filling or whatever the heck you're having done, that's cocaine based.
Lidocaine.
Lidocaine, the
Yeah.
cane, the 3 canes in there, or something like that.
Terrible.
Yeah,
Terrible stuff.
but they're okay when they're terrible. Oh, I'm thankful for it, man. Anytime I've ever had anything done in my mouth at the dentist, man, it's like, oh, I'm thankful they numb me.
Right.
Man, just throw a little ketamine in that injection.
Yeah.
You'll be better off. I'm telling you.
Just rub a little gummer. You'll be fine. We can yank your tooth out now. Yeah, and you mentioned you had mentioned several times, Thomas, the elderly and how they seem to kind of prey off of them, but at the same time they are still hitting youth, and I was trying to think while you were saying that, how are they convincing is there anything other than just pure naive ignorance that is allowing them to get that message through to the youth? So a lot of the youth, I can see that they may agree with that this propaganda because they don't know any better. They've never tried marijuana because they've been raised to be scared of it. But is it just their ignorance, or is it something else? Or like, is this propaganda actually convincing the youth in the way it's presented that they're right?
That impressionability is what they play on. And I remember actual discussions of, if you see your parents doing anything like this,
That's
you
right.
should alert authorities.
That's
you know,
right.
And then there are people who are grown up in the culture and raised that that's a thing to look out for, and these people are full of shit, so don't buy into this.
I've some personal experience here. I've got a family history of some cannabis production.
Glenn, you?
Oh my goodness!
Man.
No, not somebody in California.
No,
Oh no.
especially somebody from Northern California, right?
Not from
Yeah,
me.
no.
They live near a hill.
I mean, I don't know anybody that's ever grown pot.
Yep.
Nope. But growing up and as a kid, it was a big deal that I could not talk about the cigarettes that these people smoke that I live with. You know, it's
Yeah.
no, it was impressed upon me that don't talk to cops, don't do this, don't, be very, very tight mouth about what I said, because if I slip something as a kid, you don't know what the hell is going
Yeah,
on.
right.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I could have gotten my whole family arrested.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
especially if you go back, 10, 20 years ago, the way things were. I mean,
I'm talking early 90s. And
oh yeah, and and that just reminded me of a story. My brother almost got in a bunch of trouble just because of the same topic. In the 80s, I lived with my brother for a while, and he was married and had 2 kids at the time. And my brother doesn't smoke, and we're talking cigarettes, smoke, whatever. And one day, his son, who was like 3 at the time, was at his grandmother's house, the wife's parents' house,
The mother-in-law.
the anti-humans that we'll just leave them as today. They were just, devout Christian, and everything had to be a certain way, and you had to dress a certain way, and if you weren't the perfect Christian person, you were, going to hell, and everything about you was horrible. So I was the most horrible person they'd ever met. Anyway, my nephew is at the grandma's house one day, and they're talking about something, and he says, "Daddy smokes cigarettes," referring to the
Cannabis.
joints that we were smoking
Yeah.
out in the garage.
Oh,
So my brother got tied into a really heated debate that almost went really bad. And he's an adult. We were consenting adults in a garage away from the children, but he must have seen something or or whatever. But
kids are very observant.
They're very observant,
They notice things.
Oh yeah.
yeah, and that can get you in a lot of trouble really quick for nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really. It is amazing to think that Glenn, like you mentioned, that now, well, it depends on where you are, but here in California, they're not going to grow up like that anymore. It's not going to be a taboo thing. It's not going to be. These kids are going to know about weed all their life, and
it's not going to be a big deal.
No.
That's what
Well,
I'm hoping for.
I mean, my personal perspective and my cousins or whatnot, we've all been around it. It's
Yeah.
not a big deal. It's never been a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's only been these other people that are making a big deal, and it's like, what are you all freaking out about?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it too, and the way the American view is on like especially marijuana is, you look at the way the Europeans handle alcohol, and
If you can,
if you can, if you
over
can,
the bar.
if you can see it. I have a buddy of mine who grew up in Dublin, Ireland, and he told me that when he was a kid, he would when you went out with a family to have dinner or whatever, it was always at a bar. There was everything was a bar, So he said that basically when he was about 11 or 12. He sat up at the bar, and he ordered a pint. And he said the bartender looked at him, knew that his family was there, knew everything was under control, and gave him a pint. 11, 12 years old, drinking a pint. Because he was being responsible, and if he would have been irresponsible at any given point, they would have taken it away. The entire bar would have taken the bottle away from the kid. It was a community thing, which is something we definitely desperately seek to rebuild here. But the whole community was part of that. So as he was growing up, and this is what he said to me, is his difference of living in America was, he grew up, by the time he was 14, 15 years old, alcohol really didn't mean that much to him.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a beverage. It was just a drink. It was just a part of life. It was not that big a deal, unlike what we do in America, where we restrict people until a certain age, and we say, yo, you can't. Well, if you do that to a kid over and over and over, they just want it more.
They want it more, yeah.
And then look how many disasters we have with 21, 22-year-old kids that turn legal drinking age, and next
Go
thing you know,
insane.
they go insane,
Yeah,
or they kill
true.
3 other kids in a car wreck or whatever.
Binge drinking is a very American
Absolutely.
culture. It really is. Another good example of that, you mentioned European culture, is wine culture. Because kids are given wine very young age. It's grape juice. It's juice.
It's part of the culture. It's not. There's not a stigma attached to it.
Right.
And
demystified. It's demystified.
Demystified.
And that's one thing I've never understood too. And you feel, I feel like it's a bigger picture when it goes back to the, intruding on your privacy and your legal right of what you can and can't consume as an adult or whatever. But this whole thing where it's a giant circle of like how we're restricting people, telling somebody something's bad. And any kid, no matter what it is, if you have a bottle of water and you say you can't have it, you can't have it, the kid wants the bottle of water.
Yep.
And so this mentality that we restrict things and push it back until you're a certain age or this or that or whatever, it's just an ass backwards way of thinking. And from knowing my friend Graham and the talks we had about him growing up in Ireland, I just think, man, there's so many better ways to handle all of this than the American way. But because we live here and because people have lobbied their way into being in control, this is all we're ever going to get until we stand up. So I hope that the newer generation, younger kids that are growing up in a culture where weed's been legal the whole time they've been alive, just like people with cell phones. They don't remember what it was like to be a cell phone. Well, there's going to get to a point, especially in California, where kids are going to grow up and they're going to, oh, it's just weed. It's not a big deal. And I think it's going to take a period of time, and who knows exactly what that is, but you're going to see a decline in stupidity on drugs because if they're part of the culture and they're not a big deal, then kids aren't going to freak out and run to them just to make a point, just to be rebellious.
Yeah. Going back to your analogy with the young kid getting up to the bar and getting a drink too, if he pushes it and he drinks 2 beers and he ends up throwing up, that's probably the last time he'll do that.
Right.
You'll learn that lesson once. Kind of like the old mentality is your mom caught you smoking a cigarette, we're going to sit here and watch you smoke the whole pack, right? And then ideally you would not want to do that again. But I mean, you learn real quick when it's not something that's taboo, something that's you're told not to do. It's just, hey, we'll see what happens when you drink 2 beers.
Yeah,
should have just gone up there, had the one, come sat down with us, and you're fine. That's what the rest of us are doing. You don't see us killing 10 beers in that situation. Yeah, but Americans really do push that to excess with a lot of things, and that's one of them.
Excess is the American way.
That's
man.
it.
Right.
That's it.
Do you remember the 80s as the decade of decadence?
The decade of decadence.
That's what the 80s were referred to. Decade
Fabulous, huh?
Yeah. And that's what really started a lot of this nonsense that we have now with everybody, having to have designer this and all this, expensive things and all this. It's part of a culture that we've been building forever, and we've churned an idea of what human beings should be, and a lot of it's based on religion. So we always have that to fall back on.
Yeah. On that note, let me present you guys a question. Because essentially it's kind of happening in the States, but let's say federally it happened. If they removed marijuana out of a Schedule 1, made it legal in the country, what is left that is listed as Schedule 1 and illegal, and let's say the war on drugs continued with those drugs, would you still feel that it's as bad a thing as it was before?
Absolutely.
Why so?
Definitely.
I don't think a government has any right telling me what I can and cannot put in my body.
Okay. So you're on the angle then that we shouldn't have any regulation on
it is a violation of my freedoms.
Okay. What do you guys got? Anything
Plus,
else?
it's a big lie. There are plenty of chemicals, scheduled and unscheduled, that have benefit pharmacologically to human beings, that need research done into them for the expansion of our culture, of our available medicines, our antibiotics, all that stuff. There's so much to learn from, and there's a lot to learn about the human body and the brain through the consumption of these mind-altering substances.
That's the real problem, is that it's not the research isn't being done with these things being illegal.
That's the major problem. It's a huge disservice to humanity.
Another good point about that is our spirituality. As a species,
hell yeah.
If you follow our tracks, and this includes Christianity and earlier
Shamanism.
religions. Absolutely.
Yeah, all religions.
They all parallel psychedelic drug use.
Yep.
Mind-altering substances of
Right.
some sort.
See,
yeah.
that
Right,
makes sense.
but-
They
but-
don't want you looking into that anymore.
Oh, sure. I mean,
Only read scriptures 1 through 6, Glenn. Don't read the
Oh,
other. Don't read the
man.
ones on the side.
I'm sorry.
And don't ask where they came from.
Oh, right. But I mean, our human evolution has followed the track of, well, yeah.
Human beings
History?
like to get fucked up.
Oh, yeah.
Bottom line. Bottom
Totally.
line. Alcohol to opium. I mean, it's all there in the
Spiritual
history.
community. I mean, it all circles around itself and has throughout our history until what, the 70s. Suddenly we can't.
Yeah.
Or
In this country, I don't know how the other ones
all right.
progressed, but
Well, I mean, it goes back even further than that because you look at reefer madness and all that kind
Oh,
of stuff.
sure.
You know, the propaganda around, all the prohibition type stuff. But yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, one of the things that I've always thought was really annoying is, people say, oh, well, there's no real research on what marijuana, the benefits. Well, no, because it's illegal.
yeah, because they made it a Schedule 1, so nobody
Yeah.
can research with it.
So
That's
it goes
just
back,
rhetoric.
Yeah, but it goes back to the whole lobbying thing. You know, you've got all these pharmaceutical companies that will lobby whatever they need to make $1 billion a year off of, and they're going to lobby against whatever stops them from doing that.
Absolutely.
or whatever. Yeah, whatever competes with their profit margins.
Yeah.
Or their products.
Yeah. But if you look at the synthetic drug community and what has been developed, to give kids everything from, Ritalins to all these other things, the synthetic growth that we've given our human existence, it's done nothing good. There's been no good that's really come out of this thing.
No.
Yeah, there's some vaccines here or there or whatever. That's fine. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the other drugs that we use to control our behavior
Yeah.
and our day-to-day things. There's so many more natural options out there, and that's the thing that sucks is because, you take a plant, we're going to make this illegal, this plant that grows on the ground, because somebody can't make a bunch of money off of it or some corporation doesn't have the trademark to it.
Yeah.
And that's what we deal with a lot in our country.
Yeah, a plant that you could grow in your garden, make a tea out of, kill that toothache or whatever's bugging you. But
Yeah.
if
Yeah, but then a dentist wouldn't make money, and then a pharmaceutical company wouldn't make money.
Hugely,
Oh, man.
hugely in that corner is with CBDs, and I know
Oh,
we,
yeah.
we keep going back to marijuana here, but that's the one that we have the most amount of research done so far of the Schedule Ones.
it's also the hot topic in our
in
culture
the whole
today.
country, yeah, everybody's dealing with this. How many states? Do you guys know how many states have legalized recreational? Is it 13 now, or
is
is
it?
it? How many states have?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I think it's less than that.
Is it less than
I
that?
thought it was like 6.
Okay, then maybe medical. So medical must be.
Well, medicals will,
The one
there's a
must-
lot more that have medical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Recreational, I think we're at like 5 or 6 or something.
Okay, all right. But that when the medical opens up, it opens up access to CBDs, and CBDs have helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
Specifically, and I mean, it's probably an okay thing to plug here is the company Jayden's Juice out of California. I can't remember where they are now. Modesto, I think, right? And they specifically deal with helping parents who have children that have epileptic seizures, a lot of brain situation. I don't have the medical terms for it or whatever, but
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
there's a lot of people out there who have really
Benefited from them.
oh my, tremendously, because
Yeah.
the pharmaceutical companies get their kids on all kinds of bad
They cause
drugs.
other side effects. Then next thing you know, your 11-year-old's got a kidney problem.
Yeah, due to
You know,
all the due to
all the
processing
other
all the
drugs.
and an addiction to methadone and
Yeah.
just all kinds of messed up stuff.
Yeah. If anybody's selling gateway drugs, people, it's the pharmaceutical companies.
Oh,
That is
absolutely.
exactly the biggest pusher of gateway drugs.
So currently, 2019 May, we have 9 states and Washington D.C. that you have legal recreational use of marijuana.
Wow. 9
More
states.
than
Wow.
that. I forgot
Okay.
DC did it. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is
Wow.
crazy.
They should have a giant smoke out around that big house that nobody
Oh, yeah.
needs.
Ironic.
Agreed.
That is ironic.
So I think one of my most interesting topics on this subject is that I'd like to mention would be Portugal's drug policy, because in 2008 they made a wave to decriminalize pretty much every drug there is, and if you're caught with under a 10-day supply, it's basically a slap on the hand, if that. So I think that's amazing. I mean, there's been a lot of progress, and we've had time to see it. And one of the things worth mentioning is the needle exchange. You know, people who use IV drugs can go to this place and they can change dirty needles for clean needles. They'll give them rubbing alcohol and they'll give them condoms. And this is hugely impacting HIV transmission and other, drugs that are common, Hep C with intravenous drug users. And I think that's awesome.
And no doubt a pamphlet too that, hey, if you want to get off, here's your options and the services provided by your your county or city or state or whatever.
And their government actually puts much more of their dollars into recovery centers.
I believe it.
And not just for the rich and famous, for every man.
Yeah, see, I don't think any of our rehab centers are government funded, are they? They're
probably not.
I think they're all private.
I think they're all private. But we have the exact opposite here in America, because we have people like Mike Pence, who basically put a ban on needle exchange in Indiana while he was governor, which created the largest outbreak of HIV in 2016 in Scott County, Indiana.
Jeez. And what year was that, you say?
2016.
Oh, geez, that was not even that long ago, man.
And a lot of those prisons are privatized out there.
Oh, yeah.
There's that money.
More money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've got places like Portugal that are trying to actually build a community and help their people to, progress forward and things. And then we got places like America and Indiana and people like
I guess
Mike Pence that are doing exactly the opposite.
I guess those countries would probably say about us, well, that's kind of par for course, right? Because we don't even have a social medicine or a social healthcare system. I mean, we don't take care of our people here.
Yeah, to hear the jokes that my European friends make about America is saddening.
I bet.
They're really on point.
We still have a lot to figure out, that's for sure, as far as caring for our own, man. I mean...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because everybody complains about the taxes. Oh, they pay 60% in taxes. If you add up all the taxes we pay in California, we're paying more than 60% of our income.
And we're not getting all of the benefits that they're getting. They're not spending the money to help us. They're just, I don't know what they're doing, building
they're just giving it to Dianne Feinstein's cousin or somebody who has some BS company.
We're just bailing out the banks.
Right? Yeah. There you go. Those poor banks.
Uh-huh.
For that horrible market crash that we all suffered.
Yeah, because they lost paper and got tangible things called houses.
Oh boy,
some of those were probably yours.
Definitely people we knew. That's for sure.
Yeah, but the thing in the American culture, the way we've done things, Nixon. He was the person that really pushed the whole anti-drug thing and the war on drugs, so give it a resurgence. Because when you had the prohibition that was going on, and you had in the 30s, and you had the the reefer madness epidemic of stupidity that was pushed down everybody's throat through media, that kind of all faded away for a long time until the 60s popped back up. And Nixon was a huge outspoken against the hippie movement, against free thought, against anything that was, against his belief. And, you got to figure too, in 1972 was when the DEA was developed, and it was an organization that actually took in several other sort of misdirected organizations through the U.S. government that dealt with other things, alcohol and just other weird little crime-related things that had to do with drugs or some other thing. So a lot of those were banished and shoved together, and the DEA was basically developed in 72, I believe, through Nixon's, anti-drug campaign. So we have that to thank for, too. So it's just one person doesn't like something. If you're in power, you can change the world.
Exactly. Exactly. I was losing my train of thought there because I was thinking about I was trying to think about along lines of my question of if we had removed marijuana from Schedule 1. On the other side of that same coin, there are so many. I've been surprised that there are so many. There's a couple of psychedelic ones that are out there that they have not touched, and that's always something I've kind of questioned too. Is like salvia, right? Why haven't they? Why has that stayed off the radar? Why is it that some of these drugs that are, they're different, but as far as, well, hell, if you're going to make marijuana, if you're going to consider that a psychoactive, it is a psychoactive. But if you're going to consider a Schedule 1 as dangerous as, whatever, and pick another one, why haven't they gone after some of these other ones? I don't understand.
I think maybe there's a possibility that it's because they don't get as ingrained in the culture. They don't become widespreadly used. You know what I mean?
But okay, so if we go off the angle that they want to put more people in jail or lock more people up, but have more crimes,
more money,
for all the benefits that they get off of incarcerating people and charging them with things and all that whole system, why wouldn't they go out and seek things? Okay, so and remember when Obama did it, right? And the Obama administration made the synthetic THC illegal, and remember they combined it with bath salts.
Oh yeah,
they did, man. That happened so fast, and nobody. They scared the people with bath salts, with those stories of the zombie people, right?
Well, but I think on the other side of that coin, with the bath salts, there was a lot of people all of a sudden who started mixing chemicals in their garage. And, you know, similar to supplements, they fly below radar, and they're sold in common places like gas stations. So then you have these people inhaling these things or smoking these things, and they're getting these weird chemical reactions. And, you know, there was a rush to illegalize all those chemicals, and then those same people would come out with a close chemical offshoot and start selling it again. And they still do it to stay ahead of litigation and get this weird product to people that is doing damage in a lot of ways.
What are you talking about, dude? Dabbing soap, dish soap, that's not weird.
The Tide, the smoking
The Tide, is that what was Tide? I'm
the
sorry.
What are those little Tide balls?
The little
Tide
Tide pods?
I'm
yeah.
allergic to Tide, so I can't get anywhere near it.
Well, then I guess you're not going to be taking
I'm
bong
definitely
ribs
not
off
going
of
to be
it, huh?
smoking it, that's for sure. But I think one of the reasons, Ben, when you were asking why aren't they going off of those things, my short answer to that is because some white privileged congressman's kid hasn't died from it yet.
That very well could be it.
That seems to be a turning point for a lot of things.
Interestingly enough, too, now that I think about it, the drugs that I can think of that they haven't gone after are fairly inexpensive, you know, smoke shop type stuff, right? And they don't cost a lot of money. So, yeah, you're right. The rich kids probably wouldn't be going after those things and dying off of. They want to be freebasing cocaine, right, at the top dollar or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And when they die off of that or jump off a bridge or something, all of a sudden it's a huge problem.
Because I'll tell you this: when I was a kid, if I wanted to find drugs, I just hung out with the rich kids.
Dang.
That's no joke.
Absolutely,
Wow.
they had money. When I was a kid,
I didn't know any rich kids to hang out with. So.
Well, I didn't have a lot of them either. But when I was a kid, I didn't have money to buy drugs. I barely had money to buy anything. You know.
There's no way I could have bought drugs.
Yeah.
So the school, or where I went to high school, there were Escalades and Mercedes and all the
And cocaine.
top end cars in the parking lots. Yeah,
Jeez.
daddy's little girl driving brand new vehicle.
Future stripper.
And man, there was so much coke at that school. I mean, it was ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying, man. The rich
That's
kids, they get
insane.
the good drugs.
Yeah.
You know, the white collar kids, those are the ones that are the real drug users.
That's wild. I definitely did not. I'm sure it was at my school. I just didn't know about it at that time. That's crazy.
I played football, and you hear about it.
Wow.
Little pick me up.
Oh yeah,
Football players, little pick me up.
Just a bump.
Right?
Hey.
Just a bump.
bump will do you.
Right? They're just testing for weed, man. Snort this.
Man.
Yep. The war on drugs, man.
That's oh gosh. Do you guys think they'll? I think that eventually they will remove marijuana from Schedule 1 and make it legal nationwide.
But the issue that we are running into with that is we have a UN treaty that incorporates it.
Really?
Oh yeah, all
did not know
our high schedule drugs. There's a
Really?
yeah, it's like a multi-country clusterfuck.
Interesting.
That's a good term for
So
it.
my next question was going to be, what do you guys think will be next that the states, I guess, because obviously it's not going to go at a federal level anytime soon. So what do you think it will be next for the states to begin legalizing?
Well, there's been a lot of research into MDMA recently.
That's what I was thinking.
In regards to PTSD, and
Therapy.
it started as a marriage counseling aid, which was highly effective. They're also doing a lot of research into psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in mushrooms, for similar things, and also for end of life. Because a lot of people, and understandably so, have this terminal condition, and they become full of anxiety and fear of end of life. And they are finding, obviously, that mushrooms have a huge impact on how you accept it, how you come to terms with it, and therefore they're improving the level, the life that they have left, and with family members as well. It's having a major impact.
What were you going to say, Glenn?
Oh, there was a petition to get mushrooms legalized up in Oregon this last year.
Really?
Wow.
It's getting bigger. It's getting for
went
California.
anywhere, but
Yeah.
I've been surprised at how much research for both MDMA and psilocybin I've been hearing about and reading about. That obviously they're getting permits somehow, and they're allowing them to.
Starting a little bit. I mean, it's been going for a while, but it's getting more widespread.
Yeah, that they haven't been shut down. It seems to be growing instead of just so limited down. Like LSD is still extremely limited. I think there's only two or three research facilities in the whole country that are allowed to even touch that stuff or make it rather and to synthesize it.
Although you can still get hold of offshoot.
What do you mean?
A generic.
Yeah, well, I mean, I forget the chemical name, but there's
the closely related ones.
Right, it's like a single molecule difference that
I know what you
metabolizes into LSD in the body. But
and then there's the variations that are just used to treat like the migraines or whatever that don't are not psychoactive at all. But it's very closely related to the same molecule.
Right.
Yeah. It's like a CBD. I mean, I think a lot of people who don't understand CBDs think that it's THC. Yeah. Which is exactly not what it is at all.
Not the case at all. Yeah.
And I've had a lot of personal experiences with it. I currently buy CBD in a tincture, with zero THC in it at all. Yeah. And now that if recreational has come in, that little bottle I was paying $35 for is now $80.
Yeah.
So that kind of sucks. Yeah. But I've taken over the years several different drugs, had several different things prescribed to me because of my knees, because I don't have real insurance, so they won't actually fix anything. They just want to put a Band-Aid on it, which is give you more, big pharmaceutical drugs. None of those have ever done anything for me. Yeah. When I take the CBD at night and I mix it with a little bit of water and I kind of measure out what I do, it's the only thing that gives me any sort of relief in my joints and my knees at all.
Wow.
And that's a personal experience. And then when I was living in LA, some of us artists that lived in this community, in this building, we had there was an elderly guy there named Norm, and Norm had Crohn's disease. And everybody kind of took care of Norm because we called him the Inglewood One. And he'd been in Inglewood for years, moved out from the Midwest, just a nutty old dude, but everybody loved him. Had Crohn's disease, and everybody kind of helped him out a little bit. And one day he said to me, "Hey, can you get me some weed?" And of course I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Yeah, nobody else around here will get me any." And I was like, "Well, what do you want it for?" He's like, "I can't eat." And he had Crohn's disease. So if you can't eat and you have Crohn's disease, that's a huge issue. Jeez. And so I rolled him a joint and gave it to him. He was a cigarette smoker, so he's fine with that. I would roll him a joint and give it to him. He's deceased now, so he can't sue me for doing this. And I didn't kill him. The doctors did. But he would, I would give it to him, and he would smoke it, and I would come back and check on him a couple hours later, and his entire bag of crackers would be gone.
Wow.
And that would be more. He would eat more in that short amount of time than he had eaten in days. And so subsequently, I cannot say that word today. Yeah. Anyway, so while we were all kind of like helping him out, and we weren't giving him tons of drugs or anything, we're just rolling him up a joint once in a while and hand it to him. Yeah. But during that couple of years that I had experience with Norm, I watched his health actually go up, and to where he was a little bit more comfortable. He was gaining a little bit of weight. He could talk a little bit better because he had trouble talking. And until he went into a kind of a bad spell that kind of ended his life at the end, because at some point Crohn's disease does take over. But those last couple of years, I mean, I watched this guy gain. He was always really skinny when I met him, and he'd gained a few pounds. It just had a little bit more color to him because he was actually eating. And there's so many people who just yell and scream out, "Well, there's no good use for that, and all drugs are evil," and blah blah blah. Well, you know what? Until somebody that personally has had this experience, it takes a lot to open up those eyes. But I feel like the younger generations are starting to see that, and we're starting to see, especially with the decriminalization of things, allowing these sort of this to go on and to actually help people. For me, I don't really care about weed being legal so we can smoke it and get high. I would rather it be legal so that we can actually use the herb for what it was meant to be, which is a supplement to help us as human beings.
Yeah, that makes me think of like anorexic and bulimic
Absolutely.
People who suffer from that use it too.
Seizures.
To get their appetites back, and then
migraines.
Migraines. Yeah, there's all kinds of.
Yeah, the list just keeps going, doesn't it?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to CBD does not have any or near the same head effect. And that's probably not.
It has none.
It's not psychoactive.
Yeah, okay, it's not psychoactive, but nevertheless, when you're on it, you do feel like something, like a lack of pain, or very relaxedness of it.
I don't notice anything.
Really?
Yeah, like my knees hurt all the time, and when I don't take it, they hurt.
Have you ever tried taking a lot of it to see what it would do?
Yeah, it didn't really seem like it made that much difference.
Really?
Yeah, I've experimented with dosages a lot on it because it's CBD. It's not like I mean, it's not like it's not like you're taking 7 Vicodin.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty mild thing. But what's great about it is when it's working, you don't notice anything. You just feel like a normal human. As opposed to taking a bunch of Vicodin or other things or other drugs.
What I was wondering is if these non-psychoactive, for example, like the non-psychoactive LSD, if that would, if you would feel anything off of that, maybe not a psychedelic effect, but maybe it would have some sort of I don't want to say a side effect, but like, a subtle something that occurs to you, right? That you would feel, but
Maybe a placebo effect, huh?
maybe, yeah,
Right.
yeah, there you go. Dude, I'm tripping balls. Like, no, you're not. That's the non-psychoactive stuff, buddy. It's one molecule. It's one couple of atoms off. Sorry. Exactly.
Jeez. Yeah, but I think the education that we're and the Schedule 1 thing, at the whole UN thing, I didn't really know much about that, but I think that's the biggest hurdle that we have personally as far as like advancing any sort of research or anything, because you can't get funding. And California is one of the states that has gotten around it a little bit, and there are some centers that kind of work in that. Now that we've got recreational marijuana, most of the West Coast, or actually is all the West Coast now, isn't it? California,
And Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Alaska,
And
Washington, Oregon, California, then Colorado.
Yeah, but I mean, I think until we can open up the doors for research, can actually spend time and get funding to research these things, I think that's when the big change will happen. Hopefully that's soon. I mean, it looks like the way we're changing things are.
I wanted to make what I thought was kind of an ironic point. How many times were we told over the course of the last few decades that marijuana was a gateway drug, right?
Yeah.
Ironically enough, it seems that it is a gateway drug. It's the first one that they're legalizing, and it probably is going to lead to the legalization of other ones.
Right.
So it actually did end up being the gateway that opened the door to hopefully, others. I mean, hopefully it had something to do with the whole MDMA and psilocybin research too. I mean,
The gateway through the propaganda.
Yeah, exactly. For the people too, more importantly,
Propaganda
because
for the people.
I've personally witnessed quite a few people who were same thing you were talking about, like about the Bible Belt type people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're hardcore religious, you're anti all this stuff. My government tells me everything. They listed everything their government, and then when they legalized marijuana, all of a sudden, well, I've had this lower back pain for many years, and all of a sudden, let me get this one of the lotion rubs, or let me just smoke some CBD or just a tincture or whatever, and all of a sudden, it's an option now in their head, even though it was an option all along. It's been legal for I don't know how long. Medical's been legal here,
But the stigma was there.
but once you remove that, all of a sudden their minds are open. So I'm hoping that at least with our generation and possibly the next, that they remember the benefits that came, by this legalization, and start thinking, wait a minute, there's other stuff out there. Maybe there's great benefits to that too. We should probably fight to legalize this other stuff.
Well, the stigmatism is it's just like holistic medicines. A lot of growing up around LA, a lot of people are like, oh, holistic medicine. Oh, you crazy hippie.
I feel like they've done a very good job of making us feel guilty or stupid for thinking or considering holistic medications.
Yeah.
I mean, they really have. Every time you go to somebody I know, one of our family members, every time they go to, they have a very sick son, and every time they've gone to the doctors and nurses, whatever, and asked, well, hey, what about, we heard about this, we heard about that. Well, sorry, the FDA, we can't help you, we can't advise you on that, we can't say anything about it. If you want to try that, you're on your own. It's like, what? So they basically scare you right off the bat, with, oh, sorry, we don't know nothing about that. Well, I've been listening to you for I don't know how many years, and you're supposed to. Well, yeah, but you're supposed to know everything. So if you tell me it's not sanctioned or not safe or whatever, then I'm now all of a sudden I think, well, now I feel stupid and I don't want to try it at all.
That touches on the philosophy behind the Western mindset behind medicine, and we have this very treat the symptom sort of mentality, and rather than prevent the illness. Chinese traditional medicine, for an example, focuses on keeping the body in balance and preventing the disease from ever taking root, whereas we're wait for something to happen and then try to fix it.
Well, there's a lot more money
Oh, yes.
in
You're
selling drugs. And curing diseases, there's really no money in curing a disease. It's like selling a car that never breaks down.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
No.
And that's the mentality I think the medicine industry, the medical industry has in general, and even into the research of things, because there's so much litigation towards certain companies like Eli Lilly's and all these big drug companies that are pushing to go in a certain direction. Yeah, if you cure cancer today, You know how many people would be out of money, out of
Yeah.
jobs, research centers, hospitals,
all the
doctors,
chemotherapy places,
it'd all be gone.
And then on top of that, even it stretches further. All the consumer electronics that are sold and marketed with breast cancer or AIDS. I mean, even Apple does that. They're the red iPhones. I mean, those are
Cancer is a money machine.
Big
That's why
time.
it's here in
one
America.
of the biggest money machines they've ever come up with. Yeah,
Yeah, and there's new cancers every day, so we got to have a new pill for that.
that's right. It's like the flu; it just keeps changing. It's a different strain every time. I mean, you're right. There's
Treat the symptom.
Yep, exactly.
Good job, America.
Yes.
Good job.
America.
All right, guys. On that note, we're about out of time. We're going to go ahead and take off. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep your minds open. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address, greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com, or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.